Hey everyone, today I'm going to look at the game between Alexander McDonnell and Labourdonnais, played in the year 1834. Now, white in this game was Alexander McDonnell, who was an Irishman, but he was also a merchant and considered a chess amateur at the time. Whereas Labourdonnais was actually seen as the strongest player of the time and was actually a full-time chess player, although it was considered that he didn't play very well back in the 1800s. And it was considered that Labourdonnais was actually the strongest European player at the time, and 10 years prior to this game, he said he crushed loads of English masters. So this time, Alexander McDonnell, the Irishman, would step up to try and defeat him in a match. And this was the first game, and I believe it's one of Kasparov's favourite games. I actually found it in his book, Great Predecessors. So without further ado, let's begin. So McDonnell is white, Labourdonnais is black, and we get into a Sicilian. McDonnell plays knight to f3, black plays knight c6, and then there's d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. And interestingly, in game 12, black actually opted to take here, and queen takes d4 was played. And in game 12, black continued with e6, bishop c4, knight to e7, knight c3, knight c6, the queen went back to d1 and the bishop went to c5, and it was actually quite an equal game. However, in this game, black now played the move e5, hitting out at the knight on d4. And Kasparov actually wrote in his notes that most players in modern times would now play the move knight to b5, and typically here black can play a6, and play may continue knight to d6, bishop captures, and queen f6, queen d1, and then just queen g6, hitting the pawn, and white can defend, and it's actually quite an equal position once again for both sides. But in the first game, after e5, McDonnell now took on c6, knight takes c6, so black recaptured on c6, and white now played bishop to c4, developing a piece. The Frenchman played knight to f6, hitting out e4, and in the game McDonnell now played bishop to g5, which Kasparov was highly critical of. He believed castles was a much better move here, because if black captures on e4 with knight takes e4, white can always play rook to e1, hitting the knight, and if d5, white has the amazing rook takes e4, pawn takes e4, and white now wins the queen with bishop takes f7. If the king takes an f7, this queen takes queen, and after king e7 there's bishop g5 check, where white will pick up the queen. So Kasparov recommended castling. The best move for black was actually just to play d5 in this position. After takes, play bishop to b5, and white could gain initiative after bishop to d7, takes, and play rook to e1, attacking the pawn. And if black protects, white can play knight c3, attacking the d5 pawn. After queen e6, bishop g5, bishop b4, takes, white has knight takes d5, castles queenside to try and pick up the knight, but after c4, bishop takes e1, queen takes e1, white's given up the exchange, but actually has an extra pawn and actually regarded to have the initiative because that knight on d5 is ever so powerful. So Kasparov really hated the next move, bishop g5, because he didn't really see the positive in trading off this g5 bishop for the knight on f6. So the Frenchman played bishop to e7, white played queen to e2, and now black played an aggressive and really good move actually, d5, hitting out at the bishop on c4. If white captured on d5 with the pawn, then black can recapture, c takes d5, bishop b5 check, bishop to d7, captures, and just trade off another set of pieces, and white can castle. But here it's considered that black actually is slightly better in this position, but maybe this was a good chance of white to save the game. I mean, there's still time for white to improve their position in this variation. But yeah, white's next move felt really unnecessary. He played bishop takes f6, giving up his good bishop. Black obviously recaptured, and white retreated their bishop back to b3, and both sides just castled. And now black played a5. The point being they want to play a4, followed by bishop to a6, and try and pick up the exchange, and hit the queen and the rook at the same time. E takes d5 was played, pawn takes d5, and white played rook to d1. So okay, white's now hitting out this d5 pawn, but black can easily defend this, just plays d4, and it's actually really safe. And again, I think white played a bad move next. I think he should have played knight to d2 first. If a4, white always has bishop to c4, and after a3, b3, bishop to b7. It's not the best position for white, but they're very much still in this game, and they may be able to stop these two pawns and play knight to e4 at some point. So again, it's still not perfectly lost here for whites, but maybe black has a slight edge in this position. But after black played d4, I think McDonnell made a mistake here, because he played c4, and not so explosive this time, because now black's just been given a free pass pawn. This pawn is now free just to roll down the board. Okay, white's got a pass c pawn, but it's much further away from progressing, whereas this d pawn is actually connected to the e pawn as well. So let's see what black now did to try and increase their advantage. Queen b6 was played, developing the queen to an aggressive square, and bishop to c2 was played by McDonnell. This looks like a cheap trick to me, because the point is if queen takes b2, white always has bishop takes h7 with check, and we'll pick up the queen on b2. So obviously Labourdonnais is not going to fall for that. He played bishop to b7, developing another piece, and white now played knight to d2. Again, if black's greedy here, white may be able to get an advantage with the move queen to d3, threatening checkmate on h7. If g6, rook a to b1 can be played, attacking the queen. And if the queen moves, let's say queen takes a2, white will just pick up the bishop on b7. So black's now forced to go into this variation with e4, attacking white's queen. And after knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, white can play rook takes b2, bishop takes queen, bishop takes bishop, and this will probably end in a draw as both sides have opposite coloured bishops and an equal amount of pawns and rooks. But again, black is considered the strongest player at the time, so he's no slouch, and he definitely doesn't want to go pawn grabbing here. He played rook a e8 instead, defending his e-pawn, ready to roll it down the board. So white does a good job here of trying to blockade this, plays knight to e4, but black's really clever, just plays bishop to d8. The point is this moves the bishop out of the way, and now black is free to play f5, and we'll really try and push home the advantage of the centre pawns here. McDonnell continued with c5, hitting out at the queen. Queen c6 was played, and this is very dangerous now, because black suddenly got a queen and bishop battery, threatening mate on g2. If black can get an f5 in at some point and threaten the knight, and also threaten mate at the same time, white's in a world of trouble. So for this reason, McDonnell is forced to play f3, defending the knight on e4 and blocking black's attack. And now black just threatens to win a pawn on c5, plays bishop to e7. McDonnell defends with rook a to c1, threatening to play a discovered attack if black takes this c5 pawn. Again, black is too savvy for that, and he just plays the move f5, hits the knight on e4. Before moving the knight though, it's important to try and defend this c5 pawn. So queen c4 is played with check, and black sidestep this with king h8, and now white goes on a counter-attack with bishop to a4, hitting the queen and also attacking the rook at the same time. But Labourdonnais now plays a very good move, queen h6. The point is this queen now is ready to infiltrate on e3, and this could cause a lot of problems for white's position. Now white's last chance here maybe was to play knight to d6, because this might complicate things, make things a bit tricky. For instance, you have attacks here with knight to f7 coming in, so black has to be a bit careful. With best play though, black should still win. The best play is bishop takes d6 in this variation. After bishop takes e8, black should now play bishop to c7. If rook takes e8, then white gains an advantage after pawn takes d6, queen takes d6, and all of a sudden white's the exchange up. But after bishop c7, black's in a pretty much one position. If bishop's a4 in this position, black can play e4, threatening mate on h2. And if a move like c6, again, just bishop to c8, sidestepping the pawn. And if bishop to d7, again, black can just play e4, with all kinds of threats on h2 from the queen and the bishop. And if king f1, there's d3, bishop takes c8, and in this variation just play bishop to b6, threatening queen to e3, and there's very little white can do to defend this position, and black is overwhelmingly winning this position, even though they've sacrificed a load of material. So after queen h6 by Labourdonnais, he played bishop takes e8 from McDonnell, just taking the rook on e8. However, now black gains superiority. plays f takes e4, snaps off the knight on e4. And if white, say, took this pawn off, they're in a world of trouble with moves like queen to e3 coming in, king to h1, and maybe even just bishop takes e4 looks good here, I think. So to blunt the bishop on b7, first of all, McDonnell played c6, attacking the b7 bishop. However, black doesn't really actually care about the bishop, and instead just plays e takes f3. The point being now, black's just crashing into the position. If c takes b7 here, then queen e3 just crashes in, king h1, pawn takes g2, king takes, and then comes rook to f2 check, king g1, and just rook takes b2 check, king h1, queen f3, king g1, and queen to g2 is checkmate. So after e takes f3, McDonnell does his best to defend. He plays rook to c2 here. And now again black comes in for the attack, queen to e3. And to me it just looks like black's overwhelmingly winning this game. However, after this move was played, I ran it through the engine, as I always do, and it came up with a bizarre computer line that actually draws the game. If white amazingly plays rook to f2 here to block the check, bishop to a6, queen takes a6, bishop c5, queen to f1 to defend the rook, black can still play d3, but after rook takes d3, queen g5, this is getting very complicated. White can play h4 though, queen takes h4, rook takes f3, rook takes f3, pawn takes, and then go queen to g3, queen to g2, and bishop takes f2, king f1, trade queens, and played bishop to b6, and amazingly we're into a drawn endgame. But anyway, that was a strange computer line given there. Instead though, in the game after queen to e3, just king h1 was played by McDonnell, and now things get really spicy here. So black first of all defends the bishop with bishop to c8, white plays bishop to d7, and now here things get really fun. Black plays f2, so basically trying to threaten to play f1 and get a queen at some point, and maybe even play d3 first to block away the queen from defending this f1 square and the rook at the same time. So that's the threat coming in. So to block, white plays rook to f1, and black continues with d3. So now black's hitting the rook on c2. So to defend, white plays rook to c3, attacking this pawn and pinning it at the same time. Well, first of all, black played a very nice move, bishop takes d7. The point from this move is if white now plays rook takes d3 first, black has a sneaky bishop to e6, attacking the queen. If the queen takes, then queen takes d3 can be played. So bishop takes d7 is a very nasty move. White's forced to capture with the pawn, c takes d7, and black now supports their d3 pawn with e4. So black's given up the exchange here, but has an extra couple of pawns just rolling down the board, and it's very little white can do about this. Queen c8 was played by McDonnell, so white's counter-attacking here, and it was perfectly possible for black just to blockade and play rook to d8 here. And after rook c1, we get into a similar position in the game. There's d2, rook to d1, and queen to f4, where black's just going to steamroller white's position. For instance, queen c4, there's bishop to d6 as well, where black's threatening mates on h2. In the game though, Labourdonnais decided to play bishop to d8 and blockade the pawn with the bishop instead. And now there was queen to c4. And let's see how black finished off this game. He played queen to e1, so threatening to take the rook on f1. Obviously, if white takes this queen, then black will just respond with pawn takes. So the only way to defend this is rook to c1. And now black just played d2, attacking the rook on c1. And the queen is also defended twice. So if both rooks capture this queen, black will end up getting a queen on that square. McDonnell tried his best to defend. He played queen c5, threatening mate on f8. So if black responded with pawn takes c1 and gets a queen, then queen takes f8 is mate. Again, black's a really good player though. He's never going to fall for that. He just sidesteps a rook, rook to g8. And white's now forced into a very passive position and plays rook to d1. Quite a clever move though, because it makes sure that black's got no threats for the time being. But now black can play the lovely and artistic move e3. And this just looks absolutely stupendous. When do you ever see a position like this with three pawns camped in white's position and a queen on e1 defended by two pawns and attacked by two rooks? It's such a weird position and so beautiful that was actually in a real game. McDonnell played queen c3 now, and this position gets even more beautiful with black now playing queen takes d1, rook takes d1, and he plays the delicious move e2 with 3 pawns on the second rank, each one ready to queen and win the game for black. And this is where McDonnell actually resigned. But this was an absolutely stupendous game and really beautiful to watch, and I believe it's one of Kasparov's favourites. And Kasparov actually said in his Great Predecessors book that both players actually died really young, so it was actually a great tragedy, even though they were two of the strongest chess players around at the time. Chess history could have been very different then, if these two players had lived longer. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my analysis of this game. If you did, please do support the channel by dropping a like, comment or subscribing. And hopefully I'll see you soon with another chess video. Stay safe everyone.